This landed at a ranch at Corona, New Mexico. The rancher turned it over to the Air Force. Rancher W.W. Brazil was the man who discovered the saucer.
What I thought was a star began coming in my direction at a very rapid rate of speed.
The unidentified object, which some sources thought might be a blimp, moved slowly down the Pacific coast from Santa Monica and disappeared south of Long Beach.
I saw a UFO, and it went down the river, turned right at the United Nations, turned left, and then down the river.
UFO classified. UFO classified. No more plausible deniability. Fact, fiction, or the truth. You decide. And now, the new voice of the high desert, the hostess of UFO Classified, Erica Lukes.
Well, good afternoon, good evening, my friends. I'm Erica Lukes. I was happy to be here on a Friday evening. Tonight's show is going to be off the charts. I am thrilled to have Dr. Eric Davis here. We've had a big week in the UFO community with the announcement yesterday from To the Stars Academy announcing the Adam Research Project. And I'm reading this from To the Stars Academy's website. They announced the flagship research program, the Adam Research Project, in our partnership with Earth Tech International, a pioneering research organization in Austin, Texas, at the forefront of next-generation science and technology. Project Adam, an acronym for Acquisition and Data Analysis of Materials, will focus on the collection and scientific evaluation of material samples obtained through reliable reports of advanced aerospace vehicles of unknown origins. We're going to talk a little bit about that new announcement. That will be later in the show. But we're going to spend the first hour talking about a subject that is very close to my heart, which is Skinwalker Ranch, something that Dr. Davis has a lot of information to share with us. Dr. Eric Davis is the Chief Science Officer of Earth Tech International and the Institute for Advanced Studies of Austin. Dr. Davis's research specializations include breakthrough propulsion physics for interstellar flight science, beamed energy propulsion, advanced space nuclear power and propulsion, directed energy weapons, future and transformational technology, general relativity theory, quantum field theory, quantum gravity theories, experimental quantum optics, and much more. Dr. Davis's research activities include megawatt-class laser propulsion physics, systems designs and performance metrics, and mission applications for the United States Air Force Laser Light Craft Program, quantum optics, tomography, experiments to measure negative vacuum energy, studies on multi-layered quantum vacuum structure, and its applications. There is just so much more I've got. And Dr. Davis, I'm just going to let you finish that because I look at your bio and there is nothing that you haven't done. And specifically, go ahead. You're an adjunct professor of Cosmology and Strings Group at the Center for Astrophysics, Space Physics, and Engineering Research at Baylor University. You just go ahead, fill us in.
Okay. Well, hi. It's good to be on your show. And I've done a lot of work in mostly focusing on areas in having to do with advanced space propulsion, interstellar flight related technologies. My main focus is interstellar flight. Because of my work with Mark Millis on the NASA Breakthrough Propulsion Physics program during the period of 1996 to 2002, and the lower scale level of that program that continued with little funding from 2002 until Mark and I got our AIAA book, Frontiers of Propulsion Science, published in 2009. And so during that period of time, while I was working for Bob Bigelow at NIDS, and while I was working after that for the Air Force Research Lab at Edwards Air Force Base, California, and then following on with my employment here at the Institute for Advanced Studies at Austin, which is the theoretical arm of Earth Tech International Incorporated, with my boss, Hal Puthoff. So my whole career since the mid-'90s has all been focusing on all of this work. And I have I have a background in astrophysics. That's what I got my doctorate at the University of Arizona in 1991. I got my bachelor's in physics and mathematics there 2 years before. And then the 2 years before that, I graduated from Phoenix College with an Associate of Arts degree. And so my whole life has been interested in interstellar flight, contact with aliens, UFOs, exotic propulsion, material sciences, and things like that. And to get a good handle on a very multiple, how do I want to say? Okay, multidisciplinary topics such as interstellar flight and search for extraterrestrial intelligence and contact with them and UFOs and whatnot. That's very multidisciplinary. And a physicist who wants to dive into a multidisciplinary set of topics like that really needs to have a broad background as well as a deep background in a variety of different things. And so I chose breakthrough propulsion physics, which is the genre or the umbrella category for everything. Underneath that was my specializations in nuclear propulsion, power, and laser or beamed energy propulsion, which is what laser rockets and microwave rockets and light craft are. And so forth and so on. And then there's all the various ingredients that go into these things. Like one of my big push in theoretical research is in faster than light space propulsion using Einstein's general theory of relativity and quantum field theory. So that addresses the topics of traversable wormholes and warp drives, which a lot of people out there who are members of MUFON are familiar with my 2001 and 2013 MUFON symposium talks on and my proceedings papers on. And they're familiar with my work at NIDS on that topic, as well as my work for the Air Force and for HALPF. And I also carried that forward with the work on the ATIP program when we were subcontractors to Bigelow Aerospace Advanced Space Studies. And so that's what the focus of my career is. It's just you've got to know a lot of different things. I have a lot of different interests, and I don't like to keep too much of a specialty because that'll narrow me down too much in a career and in a professional career in physics. It's not too good of an idea to be stuck in one specialty. You want to broaden your specialties out to cover many different areas so you can contribute as widely as you possibly can to various different types of subjects. And I happen to like nuclear propulsion, antimatter, and beamed energy propulsion, warp drives and wormholes, time travel, things like that.
And it's just incredible to hear everything that you've accomplished and in the broad, like you say, the broad spectrum that you cover with all of your knowledge base. I have to ask you because, as you know, I live in Utah and Skinwalker Ranch and that whole Uintah Basin has been something that I've been researching. You have been researching it for much longer and have a much better handle on what has gone on there. But when did you first come into contact with Robert Bigelow?
I was in South Korea working at the 8th Fighter Wing for the United States Air Force and U.S. Forces Korea. And I was there as a University of Maryland professor teaching college courses in physical sciences, mathematics, computer sciences, and physics. And I was also doing some other work that I'm not going to get into, which is on the classified aspect of work that we do out there in Asia when you're surrounded by enemy nations. So you can kind of more or less gather what that entails. So I was out there teaching courses, and I had a 4-year contract. And at the end of my first year, they had no teaching work for me for the summer, which was kind of bad. My wife and my 3 little kids were stuck back in Tucson, and my wife was having to work a full-time job and a part-time job to help make ends meet. And salary was okay, but it wasn't spectacular. And I was getting really underpaid for my degree in education for that type of job. So I said, hey, it was a great experience, but I don't think I can do this 3 more years. I'm going to miss too much of my family. I can only go home twice a year and whatnot. And it's certainly no good to sit around when I don't have any income for a summer. So I picked up my issue of Physics Today magazine. I don't remember which month it was. It might have been the month of May. And I saw a very interesting job ad that was posted by the National Institute for Discovery Science. And it had some very intriguing language in it. And I don't remember it now, but what the ad it was a pretty lengthy ad, and they were looking for top flight research scientists to be directors at this institute to study the foundations of space-time and the universe, and they even mentioned the physics of consciousness and so forth. And like I said, I can't remember that was over 20 years ago. So it really intrigued me. It was a private institute in Las Vegas. My wife was born and raised there, partly raised there from birth before moving to Arizona. And my dad and stepmom moved there to go to work after they got married in Phoenix, where we're from originally, in '68. So my dad started an International Harvester truck dealership with his partners there, and my stepmom worked with them for about a year or so, and then she got a job at the University of Nevada, Las Vegas, which she retired from after over 30 years. So we've got family. So I have family. My half brother and sister were born and raised in Las Vegas. My wife had ex-sister-in-laws, brother-in-laws, and nieces and nephews, and friends of her older brothers and sisters that they grew up with in North Las Vegas. So that would be the ideal place. I used to spend my summers with my dad and stepmom because they had custody of me during my youth. And so I stay in Phoenix to go to school when I lived with my mother, and then I would be in Las Vegas during the holidays and summer breaks from school. So I loved Las Vegas. It was a great place, and I said, hey, this is a great job opportunity. Mom and Dad live there. Half of our relatives are there. And, that would be a great job opportunity. So I applied, and the next thing I know, I got a phone call from John Alexander, and he interviewed me on the phone, and he said that one of the members of the Science Advisory Board named Hal Putoff has a background and interests that are very similar to mine, and he thought that the two of us would get along really great and would work together very well. So I think he talked to the other members of the Science Advisory Board as well as Hal, possibly. That's what I thought he was inferring, that he checked with them, and he shared my CV with them. That's a curriculum vitae, which you have as academic. You have real long resumes. These aren't 2-page or 1-page resumes. These are very long because they contain our list of publications and awards and honors and education and everything else. So the next thing I know is I get a call from John Alexander, and he said that he's setting me up with a phone interview with Bob Bigelow. And he said that what happened is that he showed my CV to Bob Bigelow, and Bob all of a sudden had my CV go down from the bottom of a large high stack of CVs up to the top. And so Bob wanted to interview me right away. We had the interview by phone, and Bob really liked to talk. Bob is really a laid-back, regular guy, and that's who he is. This is the guy who used to make me tuna salad sandwiches at the Uintah Ranch during our field trips up there, or he'd make me a bowl of cereal. So, you're talking about a billionaire who's in the apartment and daily, weekly, monthly hotel business, and he had all kinds of guest hotels and other properties scattered all around the western United States. And here he is, making me a bowl of cereal or tuna salad sandwich. So, for lunch or breakfast or whatever, and he'd take us out to dinner all the time. So he's a regular guy. He just called me up, and we just had a great conversation. And then the next thing I know is he wanted me to come to Las Vegas to meet him in person for a final interview, and we did the final interview, and that was my first meeting with him in person at Park House, which is the name of his Tudor-style headquarters building on Eastern Avenue, and that was really a great experience. We had a great time, and he told me he hired me right away. So he gave me about a week and a half or a couple of weeks. This was in the beginning of July 1996. So at the beginning of July 1996, and I needed time to be able to pack everything up that I needed and move. So my start date was for July 14th, and that was my first day at work. And that's the rest. And the rest of the story is in Kelleher and Knapp's book, Hunt for the Skinwalker. So. And
I just want to throw in there that Kelleher, he responded to the ad as well, from my understanding.
Yeah, he did, and so did Dr. Emil George Onet. George often wrote it George E. Onet. George is a world-renowned Romanian veterinarian pathologist, microbiologist. And he published a number of books, volumes of books, and technical peer-reviewed journal papers, and he had decades of awards and honors, and he was a member of over a dozen professional societies in his field. George specialized in bovine and avian diseases and pathologies, and Bob hired him to be the veterinarian who would investigate cattle mutilations with Colin Kelleher at NIDS, and so the three of us applied. I don't know how many other people applied. I don't know how many other people got interviewed and didn't make the cut because I wasn't informed of that and I didn't ask. I didn't think to ask. So, yeah, Colin Kelleher, myself, and George Onett responded to the ad. Now, I responded to the ad in Physics Today. I don't know where Colin and George found the ad or how they saw it and whatnot, but they applied and we got hired. I was the first one there. 2 weeks later, the first Science Advisory Board meeting happened at the end of July, and that was also the first day that George and Colin began their jobs. So that was the first time we got to meet, just before the end of July. And then the following month, we took our first field trip to see Lefty Levengood at his Pinelandia laboratory in Grass Lake, Michigan, to talk about the crop formation stocks that he had been experimenting with in microwave ovens. And then when we got back from that, we were invited in to listen to Bob talk to the owner of the Uintah Ranch, because Bob had been connected up to him through, I think, George Knapp and Shelley Wadsworth. And Shelley Wadsworth was Bob's field investigator up in northeast Nevada near the Utah border. And I think she used to live closer to Vegas, but had moved all the way up that way later on in life. But she was one of Bob's longtime investigators. So the ranch got a high profile, got communicated over to Bob. Bob was on the phone with the owner of the ranch, and even though his name is common knowledge, I'm not going to mention out of deference to him and his family, because we had a great relationship with them, and they took a lot of crap in their community, especially his wife, from her employers, and their kids got bullied a lot in school, where they were going to school in Ballard, in the Ballard area. And so anyway, so we're there, and Bob's talking to the owner of the ranch, and he's interviewing them, and they're going back and forth about all the phenomenon. The owner was kind of summarizing what was going on, and then that was the end of that. And the next thing I know, about a week later, we hear that Bob had bought the ranch. So it was happening very fast. And within another week or two, he bought the manufactured double wide home that got delivered to the ranch and set up next to the ranch family's home. And that was going to become our observation house, our place where we would stay. It's 4 bedrooms. Let's see, I remember 4 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, a kitchen and a living room, and a laundry room. And a mud room and a porch was built on the back facing the pasture. And it was great. And so it's like one thing after the other. So anyway, my experience meeting Bob Bigelow was a lot of fun. My dad and stepmom had known all about Bob and his wife Diane since the days they first moved to Vegas in '68. And that's because Bob and Diane moved in the local Las Vegas business community. And, you know, they have the local business associations that your business people belong to. And my dad was the secretary-treasurer of the New and Used Car Dealers Association, because he was the co-owner and vice president and secretary-treasurer of McCandless International Trucks. And so they ran in the same social circles. And my dad would used to see Bob and his wife Diane, or occasionally when I was there in the summers, and I'd go out with Dad and John McCandless to have lunch at the Frontier Hotel or the Riviera. There'd be Diane Bigelow walking in with her entourage of fellow business ladies and girlfriends, and they'd be going off to have a private luncheon of their own. And everybody would say, "Hi, Diane," and Diane would say hi back and whatnot. And she was a fiery, redheaded, beautiful woman.
And it's interesting to hear, and I think it's important to hear those personal stories, because we have built up such a mythology around Bigelow, and you know how sometimes on social media or in a community, when we don't have all the facts, we create these characters that aren't necessarily based on factual information. And
yeah, that's right.
And so I think these are important things to clarify, and I appreciate that. I want to also say that Zach Van Eck was the Deseret News reporter that first broke the story about Bigelow Ranch, and he has been on my show once to talk about all of that, and that was amazing to see how quickly Bob moved in there, purchased the property, and then you guys were ready to go. So after your first initial trip to the ranch, what happened then, and how did you kind of formulate a team and a strategy?
Well, as a matter of fact, you're right about Zach Van Eck, and we met him and we talked to him many times, and we got copies of the Deseret newspaper articles that he sent us about his reporting on the ranch and the owners and their family and the events, and that's primarily what prompted this information about the ranch to get transmitted to Bob over in Las Vegas. So Zach is a really good guy. And anyway, so our first trip to the ranch was very early in September, and we began a series of twice monthly week-long trips. We would hop on Bob's jet, Cosmos, which was a British Hawker jet, and Bob would go with us the first few times. And we would do night watches out there. And we had no equipment to start with. So that we got in trouble with the Science Advisory Board because Bob didn't equip us beforehand. Instead, we just kind of made the rush to get down there, check out the new house that was installed, make sure everything was in order, and then do tours around the property to get a lay of the land and understand its geology, its weather, and or its climate, I should say, the cattle that are grazing there and whatnot and so forth. And so we spent the first few weeks there between September and October, and it wasn't until probably a few months later that we started getting our first equipment. So we were going raw. We were just going with our notepads and our pencils and very little of anything else. And the first thing that happened on our first trip there, I believe it was, or maybe it was the second trip in September, I saw a craft out through the kitchen window on the far west end. It was beyond. It looked like it was at the far west end of the ranch, actually. And it was a clear sky. It was at night. You could see the stars up in the sky, and the weather was pretty calm, and there was not much of any wind. And I see this amber-colored bright light appear out of nowhere, and it's just hovering over high up, maybe about 30 degrees above the ground. And it's very big and it's very bright. And at that distance and range, I knew it was far away because it started descending, and it descended and continued coming down and was still illuminated in front of the background mountain range, which was probably another 30 miles west, if not further. And so it came down, and it was definitely in front of the mountain range, and it was definitely on the ranch or over the ranch, because by the time it started getting low, it got to the treetops.
And I've got to cut you off right there. Of course, the best part, the juiciest part. We will be right back. We're going to take our first break. I'm Erica Lukes on UFO Classified here with Dr. Eric Davis. Stick around. You're not going to want to miss tonight.
Stand by. This is UFO Classified with Erica Lukes. Erica Lukes. The phone lines are open now at 702-425-9230. That's 702-425-9230. Worldwide callers use Skype name KCOR Radio. More UFO Classified. UFO Classified with Erica Lukes on the KCOR Digital Radio Network. After this.
Here's what happened on the last episode of Three Guys, No Ties.
You can't buy or sell marijuana for recreational purposes in D.C. Giving it away is okay, though. So some businesses have come up with
Give it away. Wait a minute. Recreational marijuana is legal, but you can't sell it. You can only gift it.
Okay. Some businesses have come up with clever ways to sell a non-cannabis product while giving away marijuana with it.
Here's a bag of cookies. They're only $48.
But the pot's free. Wow.
Don't forget your milk.
Three Guys, No Ties. Wednesday nights, 7 to 9 Pacific on the KCOR Digital Radio Network.
Good afternoon, everyone. This is your captain. I'd like to welcome you on Jackpot Airlines Flight 1610, service to Lost Wages.
They say what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. Well, apparently, they need a reality check done Vegas style.
Vegas, 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 Vegas.
Tune in Wednesday nights, 9 p.m. Pacific, 12 a.m. Eastern, for Reality Check, hosted by Jessica Johns, exclusively on the KCOR Digital Radio Network.
Biggest star in the world, bigger than Britney and Christina put together.
If it's happening on the Vegas Strip, you'll know about it here first.
You are a dirty little fun haver.
Join Jessica Johns as she explores and goes behind the scenes of what's hot and what's not. From the best entertainment Vegas has to offer to national celebrity gossip.
That's crazy. Absolutely crazy.
Jessica has her finger on the heartbeat of the city, and she's waiting to share it with you. Reality Check, hosted by Jessica Johns. Wednesday, 9 p.m. Pacific, 12 a.m. Eastern. She does Vegas right.
Yeah, baby.
Hamilton was adopted from a rescue in 2008. How could you not love him?
Hamilton the Pug's adoption story started at a shelter. Visit theshelterpetproject.org to find a pet near you. Brought to you by Maddie's Fund, the Humane Society of the United States, and the Ad Council.
One of the planet's most powerful antioxidant products is here for you to enjoy. Chaga Mushroom Tea. This tea has been used as a potent natural health solution for thousands of years. In fact, the Chinese call it King of the Herbs. The health value alone is worth a look, as Chaga Mushroom Tea packs a punch with pure vitality and smooth energy. It's 100% wild crafted, safe, and effective. Get it now at arcticchaga.com. That's ARCTICCHAGA.com, or call 916-969-2678. That's 916-969-2678. Chaga Mushroom Tea. Chaga Mushroom Tea. Order your supply today.
It's great. I think it's great. It's great.
The all-new KCOR Digital Radio Network.
Great. Make a note of it. It's great.
You're listening to UFO Classified with Erica Lukes, where the truth isn't hidden beneath the black lines of a Sharpie.
That's the craziest thing I've ever heard.
To be on with Erica, call 702-425-9230. That's 702-425-9230. Worldwide callers use Skype name KCOR Radio.
Radio contact.
Share your thoughts on the show on Twitter by using hashtag KCOR. Or head over to the live chats at KCORradio.com.
The audience goes nuts.
And now, your host of UFO Classified.
Are you ready?
Erica Lukes.
Erica Lukes. Welcome back on Erica Lukes. Always happy to be here on a Friday night and to look into the chat room and see my friends. I want to give a big shout out to Douglas, to Gabrielle, to Bruce, to Mark, and of course my favorite person in the world who's helped me so much, Northern UFOs. Thank you for getting my radio shows out to YouTube so it can reach a larger audience. All of you know that I'm here because this is a subject that is of critical importance, and we deserve to get good information, and that's what we're doing here tonight. I am joined tonight by Dr. Eric Davis, who has been the topic of discussion as of late. We had, as I mentioned at the beginning of the show, yesterday, To the Stars Academy announced the Atom Research Project. We're going to talk a bit about that in the next segment, but now we're talking about Skinwalker Ranch, which I think anybody across the planet, everyone should know what Skinwalker Ranch is. It is a 480-acre ranch in the Uintah Basin. It has long been, held in our hearts and intrigued. People want to go there, see what's going on. Dr. Eric Davis has been telling us about his first encounter where he was standing and looking out a window and observed this large amber sphere. And so, Dr. Davis, continue with that story, please.
Okay, and I'll wrap it up quick. The big light, and it was so dark I couldn't see a craft, but it was consistent with it being a light being emitted by a craft. so consistent with, thousands of years of recorded UFO sightings. Actually, at least Jacques Vallée and Chris Albeck's recent book, Wonders in the Sky, documented 1,500 years worth of UFO sightings. So this is consistent with that. Anyway, it's a big amber light, and it had finally descended below the tree level. And so it was definitely on the ranch because I could see the light shining through the trees, through the grove of trees on the far west end of the ranch. And it just sat there. And it just sat there for the longest time. And in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, I think it was a 30-minute length of time, and nothing happened. It just sat there. You kind of lost sight of it because it might have been on the ground at that point, and the brush and foliage was just too thick to see all of the light. I could see a little bit of something. And then I think after 30 minutes or so had passed, all of a sudden we saw the light again, and it was very bright, but it had moved a significant distance horizontally to the left of its landing position, and it stayed on for a long time, and it winked off. And given how far it was not a safe place for us to go hiking out there because there is some really rough, rugged territory out on that end of the ranch where you can drop off to about a 20-foot drop into a crevice where a creek is running through and get killed. So it's not really good territory. And also, it's also a part of the ranch where if you walk out there with any netting over your head, you'll probably have about 100 mosquitoes per square centimeter all over your face and in your eyes and everywhere else. So it's a real bad place to be unless you're prepared to go. And we didn't have our coveralls or any protection for our head, and we certainly did not remember to take any mosquito repellent out there. And that was a big thing we learned very early on at the ranch.
And so,
and Erica, we saw another sighting of that same type of light in November, in the middle of the night, like about 2 to 3 a.m. Colin Kelleher and I are out doing a night watch on the back porch, and that same light came flying out from above. That same type of light came out flying from above the bluff and made a 90-degree turn right over our heads and just kept going in a smooth pattern, and it did not have the lights of any aircraft. I have a private pilot's license, and due to the work I was doing outside of my teaching in Kunsan, South Korea, I had the opportunity to get to do flight training in simulators for F-16 fighters, and I got to fly in F-16 fighters with instructors, and I also got to fly F-15 fighters in Phoenix, Arizona, when I was first getting my pilot's license in junior college. So I know I'm an experienced aviator. I know what aircraft lights and how they look and how they sound. This was completely silent. There were no running lights and wing lights and tail lights and headlight like you typically see. And it was just that same big, large, amber glowing light, and it just flew right over in a 90-degree turn and just kept on going. So that was the second one in November. And then the rest of the story, everybody can find in Hunt for the Skinwalker book.
And that is a great book, and I also encourage people to read the Utah UFO Display, which was written back in the 70s by Dr. Frank Salisbury with help from Junior Hicks, who is my hero. And I'm going to go up and meet with him very soon, but I just want to throw this out there for people who don't know who Junior Hicks or Frank Salisbury are. Junior Hicks was a science teacher, and back in the 60s, he started collecting UFO reports. And it's an interesting story, and I will have him on so we can explain it to you. But the policemen, tribal police, ended up giving him reports, and he has now over 700 reports of really profound encounters in the Uintah Basin. Dr. Frank Salisbury was a botanist who wrote the Utah UFO Display, and I've been actually going through his archives at the Special Collections at the University of Utah. So two really important men. Of course, Eric, you know all about them because they, especially Junior.
We met him.
Yeah.
We met him. Yeah, we met with him, and he worked with us to do our field investigation. He brought a box over one day containing all of his original case files, every one of them. I don't remember the number of them now, but it was a small box filled with every single case file that he investigated for 30 years, over 30 years. So over the 30 years from 1953-54 to 1984, he kept meticulous records on UFO encounters and events all around the Uintah Basin, and that information formed the backbone of Frank's book. So I would say Frank's book and the Kelleher Knapp book are the two best books to read. You've got an old book and you've got a modern book on the events and the phenomenon that occur in the Uintah Valley. They complement each other very well. And so we were in contact with Junior a lot, and he is phenomenal. He is just phenomenal, and it'll be a good show for you to have him on.
I know he is a kind man, and for me, just wanting to research.
Hang on, I just lost you on the Bluetooth. Hang on, I'm going to reset these.
No problem. I was
start talking again. Sorry about that.
No, that's okay. It's it was just cool, awesome. I was just saying that for me as a researcher, especially here in Utah, it is hard to get information, to get access to researchers, and he has been an inspiration and should be to anybody all over the world who cares about this. I don't know if I mean, honestly, and you've mentioned this before, if it weren't for Junior Hicks, nobody truly would know about the importance of Skinwalker Ranch or the Uintah Basin.
Yeah, that's right. And not only that, all the UFO and Bigfoot events that occurred in the Uintah Valley, because they had very spectacular cases that Frank Salisbury used Junior's reports to document in his book. And he even has a front matter page that shows all the different type of UFOs that had been seen. And I mean, we're talking like the sheriff, the chief deputy sheriff, the Vernal police officers and chief, and the mayor of Vernal, and city engineers, really well-educated, high-caliber people, as well as school teachers, business folks, regular folks, ranchers and farmers. They had seen so much of this phenomenon. Many of them had multiply witnessed a single one. And so there was a lot of cross-corroboration. And so Junior brought his box of reports over and let me take them back to Las Vegas. So I took them to Las Vegas and I made a photocopy of every page. I bound our copies into a big notebook binder, and then I took his box back to him on my next field trip. And then what I did is on a later longer stretch back home in Vegas, I spent a great deal of time going through the statistical analysis of every single aspect that was reported by witnesses in each and every report. I created a pattern analysis like what the CIA does, and an intelligence collection and analysis, and frequency plots and whatnot. Everything I could think of to help analyze the phenomenon's pattern and see if we can make sense of anything. And it was a phenomenal thing. So it was really a blessing to get to work with him.
Oh, he's a wonderful human being, and I know for both for Junior and Frank Salisbury, they're devoutly Mormon. Frank passed away a few years ago, and that was something that was it's been a difficult process for them through their lives to have to work to reconcile the religious viewpoints with what they're witnessing or hearing about. And I have to ask you, so let's go back to the sightings that you had. After you had the sightings, what was your process? Did you go back to Las Vegas, and how did you input the data after the sighting?
What we did is we were learning as we went, because you don't have a group of scientists like us with experience already in hand on this field. We were not in ufology before we got hired by Bob. Colin Kelleher came from the National Jewish Cancer Research Center at the University of Colorado in Boulder. George Annette came from South Dakota. He was working for the state's veterinarian office. And I came from the University of Maryland, University College, and was a subcontractor to the U.S. Forces Command through the Pacific Air Force. So, I'm an astrophysicist. Colin is a microbiologist, immunologist / biochemist, cellular biologist. I mean, those guys have long professional interdisciplinary titles there. And I told you about George already. And so we have varying interest or exposure to UFOs. Colin had a lot of exposure in England to the crop formation situation. And I think even Bob Bigelow had hired him to be a temporary short-term investigator on contract in June of the year that we got hired, June of '96, the month before he got hired. And I think he actually probably got hired that month. And he was in Boulder, Colorado at the time. And Colin comes from Dublin, Ireland, and had lived in Canada with his Canadian wife and their kids before immigrating to the United States. And George came from Romania and had been in the United States. He got away from Ceausescu's communist government. He had to run across the border to escape possible assassination as an intellectual. So he ran across the border and had to leave half of his family behind, and he immigrated to the United States for asylum, refugee status. And he stayed in the United States thereafter until communism fell in Eastern Europe, and his wife and kids were able to come back to the United States and join him. So we had varying backgrounds, and George had no background or exposure to paranormal and UFOs. Colin follows meditation and altered states of consciousness and the physics of consciousness and the medicine of consciousness and the genetics and microbiology of consciousness. So he's already ahead of us quite a bit on that. And I had an interest in UFOs dating back since middle school. And my wife and I had our first joint UFO close encounter experience in 1989 when I was just finishing up my PhD at the University of Arizona. So we had a UFO encounter, and so that was my first exposure to a real UFO was in 1989. And I was I was 28 years old. So, no, and actually I'm sorry, I take that back. That would have been in 1991. That was in 1991 when that happened. Sorry about that. So that was in 1991 when that happened. Oh no, I got to take that back again. Boy, it's been so long. I can't hear now. I don't want to say, I think it was 1990. So it was May 1990. So that's when it happened. Okay, because it was before I graduated with my doctorate, and I walked in through commencement following that episode in May of 1990. I think I went through commencement in May 91 because there was a long delay in scheduling my PhD oral defense. So anyway, so I'm the only one who came in besides Colin who had UFO exposure, and I had been a member of APRO in Tucson. Now I grew up in Phoenix. So I had been getting the APRO newsletter, and I had been a member of APRO ever since I saw Bob Emenegger's documentary on television back in 1974. And so I joined. My mother got me a subscription to the newsletters and a membership as a student, and I kept up with it until I went off to college, and I just dropped all that and forgot about it because I was too busy doing college calculus and physics and calculus and chemistry and everything.
So I've got to ask you right there, do you know where the APRO files are? This is the $1 million question.
Where the APRO files are?
Mm-hmm.
I have no idea.
Dang, okay.
I have no idea.
It was worth it.
You know what? If you really want to know that, then what I can do is I can contact Jacques Lee and ask him, and he may or may not know, or he may know who has an answer to that question if he doesn't know.
Okay.
So I can find out for you.
Thank you.
Or
that would be
Schuessler.
Good.
John Schuessler is still John and Jacques were both members of the NIDS Science Advisory Board, and we still maintain contact in our private research group. And so I can ask John Schuessler. Maybe he knows. If he doesn't know, he'll know who knows.
Okay, thank you. That would be great. That's the $1 million question that some of us want to find out about. And so you had these sightings, and you and Colm, I mean, had an interest in this before you went to work for Bigelow. So what was your learning process? How did Bigelow give you information so you could learn?
Well, Bob did not give us any training per se. There wasn't any training at all. I think what we had to do is we were guided by the NIDS Science Advisory Board in our field work, so that we would go out to the ranch, do field studies there. But that wasn't the only place we went. We did cattle mutilation investigations in New Mexico and other states and other cities and locations and so forth. So including Utah. So George and Colin pretty much invented the animal necropsy protocols. That follows the forensic procedure of criminal evidence that has to be done because you're looking at a murdered animal. You know, it's not a human, but it's been killed deliberately. And so there are forensic techniques and there are veterinarian techniques for doing necropsies out in the field. So Colin and George invented that, and they used their talent, education, and skills to put that together. The UFO side of that we had to invent as we went along, but we had a lot of guidance from the Science Advisory Board to help us when we were pinging along here and there, because you had Jacques Lee on the board, and Jacques would pretty much guide us in the best way, best practices for doing UFO investigations in the field, what to do, what not to do, so forth and so on. And we had a little bit of guidance, of course, from John Alexander. He is not a UFO investigator per se, but he has a lot of experience in unusual subjects, as we all know from his background, and especially military intelligence. And we had Kit Green, being a former CIA high-level officer and the number 3 man at General Motors back in those days, and Hal Puthoff, and he had Hal wasn't a UFO investigator himself per se, but he had looked into it and he knew all the talent out there, and John Schuessler, and of course John Schuessler is a UFO investigator, so we also got John's input. So the 3 of us basically took a lot of guidance from the most experienced members of the NIDS Science Advisory Board to help us figure out, guide us in figuring out what the protocols would be, lay down a set procedure, standards, and then we started finally getting the instrumentation in, and so then we started getting cameras and IT&T, military class IT&T night vision binoculars, like the 3rd generation ones, and adapters for the camcorders, and I outfitted the ranch with a computer weather system, and what else? Oh, I can go on and on about this. This could probably take us a whole other appearance on your show to talk about.
Well,
so,
I will have you back.
That's essentially what happened. Yeah, well, so we had to invent it as we went along. Basically, there was no guideline. We didn't adopt the MUFON guideline. I'm sure that there are elements of MUFON's guidelines in what we were doing, because I know we did borrow from some of it. There was also Project Visit, which John Schuessler and Al Holt at Johnson Space Center had developed field investigative protocols with the help of the NASA Center Director. That was, I don't remember his name right offhand, but it was the director of the Johnson Space Center back in the 70s and 80s, or at least I think, yeah, during the 70s and 80s. And they had the very quiet program. It wasn't high profile, and it was not an official arm or official organization of NASA. And this was just a group of the NASA contractors and NASA personnel that got together to investigate some really spectacular close encounter cases in Texas. And so we borrowed a lot of that information. So we did a lot of reading. I mean, Bob had a UFO book library, everything on the paranormal and UFOs. And so we read the books. We read all of Jacques Lee's books, his case books, Forbidden Science, and so forth. We read John Schuessler's book on Cash Landrum, and so forth and so on. So we got our ideas, we talked to folks, and we put it down into practice.
And so did you ever look to, because Project Hessdalen over in Norway was in full swing then, did you ever do any research about that or hear about it? Project Hessdalen, yeah. Yeah, it's Hessdalen, actually. Actually, Erlingstrand was in the United States with 1 or 2 people on his team, and I don't remember the circumstances behind that, but all I knew is we were alerted to that. And maybe if not John Alexander, maybe somebody else on the NIDS Science Advisory Board had arranged for Erling to come and visit us. So he came to visit us, and we invited him over to NIDS, and he gave us a presentation on his work. And I don't know whether he was there to seek funding from Bob. I wasn't informed of that, but I was just, I just received a briefing like the rest of us did about the nature of what he was doing and what he was recording, and he gave all of us copies of his briefing slides, and it was very, very interesting work, and so we were very familiar with Erlingstrand, and he knew us, and I think we had some occasional email contact with him through the years. That's great. I mean, that for me, as an investigator here, trying to learn things, that was one of the things that I discovered. And it was truly, I had to look outside the United States to get good information, because what you see here in the United States is such a muddled pile of nonsense. it's hard to find good research.
Yeah. There was an intention at NIDS for the staff to go overseas to investigate. We had to have a high bar to spend money. And, you don't want to spend money on weak cases, and you've got to be very careful because you could waste thousands of dollars transporting between 1 and 3 scientists all the way out to Europe or other countries, and they've got to stay there for a week or two and eat and have transportation and gamble money no, I'm just kidding. That kind of stuff. And so that gets expensive. So we had to narrow our focus to the close encounter cases. That would be the highest reward, but they would have the highest risk associated with them. So because they have the high risk of possible hoaxes or being a weak case in the end. And we were leaning toward that, but Bob just didn't want to go into that. He was leaning toward it, but he just changed his mind and decided he didn't really want to spend that kind of money doing it. So we pretty much stayed in the United States, and we did not do a lot of traveling everywhere. We set up a 1-800 number that people can call us on the phone and record their events on our voice message. And then what we could do is we would get their message the next morning at work and take their information down, call them on the phone, and then interview them on the phone. And if the case rose to a high enough level that it justified spending money to go out there, then we would go out there and investigate it ourselves. And Colin and I, unfortunately, were the victims of such a kind of a case in Knoxon, Montana, where we thought we had a really spectacular alien attack of some young folks out in the forest, and turned out to be a bunch of kids that were half blacked out from drinking all night and taking drugs. And then we went on a property because we were told by the property owner that there were 3 UFO landing pad marks on the dirt. We found it, and it was a definite hoax.
I
look at
hate
it, and I could see that the depression made in the ground was made by a coffee can, and the rocks were not compressed in the soil. They were above. All the little rocks and pebbles were above the soil. So immediately I knew it was a hoax.
Okay, and
so
I have to say, we've got to go to break, and I just want to say that I'm glad that you have investigated hoaxes as well.
Yep,
that's awesome. Oh, and I've got so many more questions to ask you. We're going to go to break here pretty quick. I'm Erica Lukes here on KCOR, the best digital broadcasting network on the planet. We will be back.
Listen very carefully.
This is Houston. Say again, please. Houston, we've had a problem.
This is UFO Classified, live every Friday night, 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern, exclusively on the KCOR Digital Radio Network. The truth is out there, just waiting to be discovered.
And now, if you will, accompany me on a journey to the future.
For more information on the host of UFO Classified, Erica Lukes, upcoming guests, as well as links to the past shows, visit her website at UFOclassified.com. UFO Classified. UFO Classified. This is KCOR Las Vegas, home of the Digital Radio Network, broadcasting from a shack just south of Area 51. Wait, that doesn't exist. This is the KCOR Digital Radio Network. Now for the news.
Landed at a ranch at Corona, New Mexico. The rancher turned it over to the Air Force. Rancher W.W. Brazil was the man who discovered the saucer.
What I thought was a star began coming in my direction at a very rapid rate of speed.
The unidentified object, which some sources thought might be a blimp, moved slowly down the Pacific coast from Santa Monica and disappeared south of Long Beach.
I saw a UFO, and it went down the river, turned right at the United Nations, turned left, and then down the river.
UFO Classified. UFO Classified. No more plausible deniability. Fact, fiction, or the truth. You decide. And now, the new voice of the high desert, the hostess of UFO Classified, Erica Lukes.
Welcome back, everyone. I am here tonight with Dr. Eric Davis, who is the Chief Science Officer of EarthTech, and he is also one of the people that was involved with NIDS, and he was at Skinwalker Ranch during this big, important research study. Right, and if you haven't read Hunt for the Skinwalker by George Knapp and Colm Kelleher, you've got to read that. Also, the Utah UFO display. The Uintah Basin is a hotbed of activity, and as Dr. Eric Davis knows, there are other places like that all over the world where we see the same types of phenomena. Dr. Davis is currently involved as an advisor at Skinwalker Ranch under the new ownership in 2016. It was purchased by Admantium, and I have been privy to personally viewing some of the videos and the new evidence that they are obtaining. They are investing a lot of money into research, into installing security systems there, and they have taken a leap forward on their research. I have also heard that there have been people that have been injured and hospitalized on the ranch currently. So we're going to have to talk a little bit about that, but there's a little bombshell for you. Dr. Davis, we were talking about, back looking at, Erling Strand coming over, briefing NIDS, and then close encounter cases, the 800 number that was set up. Where else did you go when you were looking? Because I know that you did the data analysis with Dr. Jacques Vallée with regard to all the Skinwalker information, but there were other locations as well. Where else did you travel to get information? Was Michael Lee Hill, was he involved in part of that?
Are you talking about investigations, like field
yes.
investigations?
Yep, field investigations.
Oh,
yep.
my gosh. We went down and investigated the Phoenix Lights. Colm and I did. And we investigated, George and Colm investigated more cattle mutilations than I was on. We had several trips to northern New Mexico in the Chicoria Apache Indian Reservation. The name of the town escapes me now, but it's just very close to Mount Archuleta. And there were a lot of cattle mutilations out there or in that area. And they had done cattle mutilation necropsies and investigations there. I went on one with Colin when George wasn't available. And so then there was other trips that I didn't make, but I'm trying to think. A lot of places in Utah. We used the ranch as a nice base, so we pop over to White Rock, go to Vernal, Ballard, Gusher, other areas of Fort Duchesne and Randlet, and oh gosh, I can't think of where else. All the way out to back to Hebron, and so there's a big lake out there. I want to say it has the name Strawberry on it. Does that?
Yeah, Strawberry Reservoir. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's it. Okay, so we have cases out there, and we did a lot of investigations on a variety of UFOs and Bigfoot cases. And sometimes we had UFO cases where Bigfoot was seen, and sometimes there were just cases where Bigfoot was seen, but there was no UFOs. And Colin and George, or Colin and our other field investigators that got hired on later on. One of them was named John Valier. He was a retired FBI special agent. And the other one was Roger Pinson, who came to us from he was actually living in Las Vegas and had worked for the state law enforcement for a time, but he was a San Diego police officer before that and got injured on the job before moving to Las Vegas. And before that, he was Air Force AFOSI special agent. So we had those guys working with us, and so I didn't go on all the places. We would send those guys out. So those guys have been out to Highland, Illinois, for the 1999 Highland, Illinois big UFO case that was flying around there. Outside of the St. Louis area, it was in the, my recollection, it was in the Illinois-Missouri border area. And so they investigated that. And like I said, we went out early on. We made not one but two trips to see Lefty Levengood, or Bill Levengood, as everybody formerly knew him, but his nickname was Lefty. And he had his Pinelandia laboratory in Grass Lake, Michigan, where he lived with his wife, Linda. And we made two trips out there, and it's once in, I guess, late 1996, and another one in 1997. Sometime it was in warm weather, so I think we did it in the spring. And we were just talking about crop formations, looking at his latest evidence, looking at what he was experimenting with, and some other things that he was coming up with. We didn't do any UFO investigations out there. And we had done a couple of UFO investigations out in Las Vegas, and did some up at Mount Wilson, northeastern Nevada, and drove around Area 51. Kind of poked around there to see if we can agitate the Whack and Hut security guys and see what would happen. So
awesome.
We played little games out there. We went to the little Alien and got some ice cream and some drinks, and the famous the mailboxes out there.
Yeah, the black box that's not there anymore from what I hear. But
Yep, that's right. Oh, yeah. So we drove out on the dirt road out to the Area 51 back entrance, or one of them, and saw the warning sign. So, we parked, walked up to the edge of the line, and just stood there, didn't take pictures, and all of a sudden the Whack and Hut Jeep with blacked out windows appears out of nowhere on top of the hill behind us. And so we said, aha. So we read so much about that happening to other ufology fanatics and fans and field investigators and whatnot. So we decided, well, we're going to play it cool. We're not going to let Lincoln County arrest us. So we just got back in our SUV and drove off, and they followed us out until we left and passed that mailbox.
Well, I don't blame them. You're causing trouble out there. So I have to ask you.
We were having fun.
Well, that's good. And I've been on that drive myself. It was an adventure.
Yeah.
But I have to ask you, because we know that MUFON was involved with Bigelow, and this has been, again, another kind of a hot button topic because we know that MUFON basically bought the database from MUFON. And so can you explain to us how that happened and what the details were?
I need more information. I don't know what it is that you're talking about.
So there was a point in time where Bigelow approached MUFON to buy access to the database. And MUFON in exchange was given money, and a lot of that specifically went to MUFON's marketing and different things. And they had a team of investigators that they would give money to buy equipment, to get on planes and go out and investigate cases that were...
Oh, that was the STAR team.
Yeah.
That was the MUFON STAR team.
Yeah.
That was set up by Bass as part of the DoD contract to set up a rapid 24-hour investigative team. So I don't know the specifics of the database issue because that didn't fall into my purview. So it sounds vaguely familiar. I think Bob tried to buy the MUFON database back in the 80s or 90s, even before NIDS, and I had heard some rumors about that from John Alexander. So it's not the first time, but I think that was part of the DoD contract. And you want to get the database because he had a computer program set up that would do pattern analysis. Well, okay, let me back up. They had built a computer program at Bass, and the purpose of the program was to do a military, not even a military, it was actually a civilian, private company designed database warehouse program. So the Bass folks were part of that to build this database. I mean, they had to give, user interface inputs to the software designer who was doing all the coding. And, they would go back and forth on what was the most effective interface of data between the user on the computer and what's stored in the warehouse. So the idea was to set up a big database of all the UFO databases and warehouse it. And I think that's probably what you're referring to was that Bob, I know I heard some wind of that Bob was supposed to buy the MUFON database because they want to move that into the data storage warehouse among all the other ones, like Larry Hatch had one, New Fork had one, Fufor had one, and my gosh, Dick Haynes had his at NARCAP. Was that NARCAP? I think that was Dick Haynes' organization.
Yes.
So they had theirs. So the idea was to collect all the databases if they could and buy them and incorporate them into this new program that was being designed from scratch. And I understood basically it was just a very fancy reprogramming of Microsoft Excel, and just using very fancy coding of Excel to be able to add databases in, and you've got them laid out in organizational charts so that you have certain ways of accessing the data efficiently. And so then you could start doing pattern analysis on the data. So like if you put a keyword, a search word in the program, I think it would pull up all kinds of pattern analysis and frequency charts and, all kinds of histograms and things like that to help you figure out something pertaining to that keyword. And that's the gist of it. It's more deeper than that, but it's been years since I've been briefed on it, and I don't remember all the particulars anymore, and I'd have to spend a great deal of time digging in my records to find it, to find the briefing on that particular program. But that was what it was for, and that was just to incorporate MUFON's big extensive database into this program so that BASS could provide the U.S. military with a very coherent, highly responsive, effective means of analyzing UFO cases all over the world. And the STAR team was designed to do 24-hour turnaround on any UFO cases that were called into their number and or communicated by email. They would take a report just like we did at NIDS, and then they would evaluate it, go through a protocol scrub to decide which was high value versus which was needed follow-up. And if any of them didn't make a cut on follow-up phone calls, then they weren't going to be investigated. So anything that rose to the bar, that rose to meet the bar of the minimal requirements for spending money on it, then you had a team that would get a vehicle. They'd have the credit cards, already pre-charged credit cards, or pre-filled credit cards to be able to pay for their travel expenses and their lodging and meals. And they had equipment, and they were all trained, and they were all very professionally trained by a guy with a military background who knew how to do field investigations. And he was a member of MUFON. And so that was what that was about. And I don't know anything more about what happened with that as far as how many cases they investigated or anything, because none of that information came across my desk. I wasn't concerned with that aspect of the program.
And it's interesting that you talk about data analysis and how you can search keywords. And there is a certain person involved in ufology right now who uses a pseudonym, who has been going out and collecting all the data. And I wonder if perhaps all that data isn't going into a database to do just that. And I think that's just a statement I'm going to throw out there. So you don't have to respond, but with regard to MUFON, since that was a part of the DoD contract, I mean, is that something that any of the MUFON members, I mean, who was privy to that information, and what does that mean for MUFON?
My guess is that the STAR team members, probably the manager, the director, and the trainer were privy to it. Jim Carrion was the director of MUFON at the time, so he most likely knew. The MUFON board of directors knew. And I'm sure the other MUFON directors of the various divisions were also in on that. So that's my knowledge of it.
Okay. I mean, I think that it is good to know that, like with Bigelow, data was going somewhere where it was actually being, utilized, researched. With regard to the Skinwalker Ranch and how you were investigating up there, what were some of the things that you employed as researchers, investigators, to try to kind of goad the phenomena?
Well, I didn't investigate anything. Are you talking about during the BASS era?
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
Yep. Well,
I was severed from that. Basically, we would get Hal and I would get reports from BASS on a regular basis, like a big 3-ring binder of summary sheets on each of the incidences that were investigated. It was the BASS personnel on the ranch that did the investigations. That was their job. That's what they were paid to do. And a lot of that involved the security officers. So the security team that was to secure the ranch, They were given equipment, they were given training by most likely Colin Kelleher and a couple of the other Bass folks who were former military aviators, had worked up the investigative protocols, and I'm sure that they had done all that training with the security teams, and probably and I know they sent some folks down there who were not Bass employees, who were a group of scientists. They would have been government officials as well, politicians and so forth, who went down to tour that site to see it. And but anyway, the point is that the purpose of that was done by Bass itself, using Bass personnel. And Hal and I just got the reports, and if there was any need to give advice, we would give it, but we were never asked much in the way of advice because Bob is an old hand at it. You know, he owned NIDS. He owned NIDS in the ranch up until he sold it just a couple of years, 3 years ago, and or 2 years ago actually. And so he worked with Colin Kelleher, and between him and Colin and the two military guys who were their top executives, they figured out everything that they wanted to do to be able to carry out field investigations. Now, if they did anything off the ranch, I'm not aware of it. I was too busy doing the other part of the contract that EarthTech was subcontracted to deal with. And then the program ended in 2012, and we couldn't get refunded for another cycle. And we were told we had to find a new home in the Department of Defense, and if we did, we could get a new funding cycle. And we had a hard time doing it because there was a lot of bureaucratic inertia, an even larger amount, or even a bigger wall of bureaucratic resistance among folks there was a lot of infighting. The resistance was caused by infighting between high-level appointees of the president who were political people in charge of directorates in certain agencies, and they were battling over our program funding, because when they saw that we were getting a big chunk of Phase 2 funding, they started fighting like cats and dogs over who would get the money. And then the person on the chain of command above them would see this fighting and arguing going on for about a half a year, and by the end of that year, when the decision needed to be made to adopt the Bass program, to adopt the Department of Defense's program contract with Bass and run it and pick it up where it left off, so that we could then talk about where Bass could have gone off the ranch to do other investigations, either overseas or elsewhere in the United States. And the fact is that by the end of that year, the agency deputy director got really upset at a meeting that they had, but that individual had with their chiefs, their directorate chiefs and so forth, and just said, you know what, for the life of me, all this is just crap. You guys won't stop bickering and arguing it over it. As far as I'm concerned, I don't want to have anything to do with it. We're done. So they walked away from it. And that left us in limbo. And it took us another couple of years for another funding cycle opportunity to come up. And so that fell apart because we still couldn't get a home. And the home is the agency that has to host the outside contracts with the contractor. The ATIP program was run itself by Lou Elizondo within the USDI. That's the Office of the Undersecretary of Defense for Intelligence. But they hand off outside defense contracts to another agency who is the program manager of record, or the agency of record that handles the program contract for the contractors. So because USDI is not set up to do contracts with contractors, they find a DOD component, a DOD agency, or a DOD directorate that has an office and a manager at a high enough level that they can have the authority to let out a broad area announcement or a request for proposals on the open internet, on the DOD's website, advertising this project, and that they're soliciting proposals for contracts. And so you need an office to do that, and that does not come under a secretary's office. That comes under one of the DOD agency or component offices. So the Defense Intelligence Agency was the first one, and we were trying to find another one to pick it up after the director of the DIA refused to renew the program under his command because he did not get adequate enough information to understand the full scope and depth of the program. He was only given superficial information about the program, and he didn't think much of it, of the outcome, and so he just decided, I don't want to do anything about it. I don't want anything to do with it. The reason why he got superficial information about the program in an official briefing is because you have to be careful what you tell certain people. You do have the Collins elite out there, and Nick Redfern is absolutely right, but he's also wrong. He's right that there are religious fanatics that are embedded in various levels of the United States government, and some of them are scientific fanatics. They're not necessarily religious, and so they're blinded by scientific prejudice and bias and elitism. So anyway, you've got you don't have an organized Collins elite. You have a loose. You know what? Loose confederacy is not even right. They're not even a confederacy. It's just a sporadic number of people here and there, usually an individual, maybe two individuals, not much more than two or three that know each other or work together, who are uber religious, either Christian or otherwise, and they view UFOs and aliens as demonic and satanic. And they're in a position of authority where they can deny any kind of progress or program being set up, or any kind of program that's in operation to proceed or progress or move forward, get refunded, get new funding, or whatever. They can deny it. They can stop it in its tracks because they have religious prejudices against UFOs. And they just simply, one 3-star Air Force general told somebody I know at a major legacy aerospace corporation once on this particular topic, and it had nothing to do with BASS or the ATIP program. This is a historical program dating back to the 80s. And he basically told this vice president, patriotic Americans don't want to have anything to do with demonic technology or Satan, because that's going to lead to their downfall. Patriotic Americans want to stay away from the devil.
Absolutely, and we've got to talk about this after the break. This is really important, and I'm so glad you went there. We have got one last little break before we wrap up the show. I'm Erica Lukes here with Dr. Eric Davis. Of course, the best is yet to come, so stick around.
Stand by. This is UFO Classified with Erica Lukes. Erica Lukes. The phone lines are open now at 702-425-9230. That's 702-425-9230. Worldwide callers use Skype name KCOR Radio. More UFO Classified. UFO Classified with Erica Lukes on the KCOR Digital Radio Network. After this.
1 million miles till midnight. A story of timelines, artificial worlds, simulated races, and the galactic imprint, and the destiny of a blue world called Earth. 1 million miles till midnight, written by Solaris Blue Raven, is a journey through the mind's eye which allows the reader to surf a wave of technological and multidimensional intellect, revealing a bridge between conscious design and the truth. A multidimensional bleed-through awakens the world of artificial intelligence to set sail into the frontiers of a vast multiverse, morphing planets and terraforming ascended worlds beyond the linear programs of a fated race. 1 million miles till midnight will awaken, inspire, prepare, and enlighten one to the many multidimensional states of consciousness and worlds we reside in. With every cell and atom, we are this truth and multiverse. 1 million miles till midnight. Written by Solaris Blue Raven. Available now at Amazon.com. Don't wait. Get your copy today.
It's great. I think it's great. It's great.
The all-new KCOR Digital Radio Network.
Great. Please make a note of it. It's great.
If ever a breed was affectionate to a fault, it's the Golden Retriever. They're people dogs, pure and simple. And the Golden Retriever Rescue of Southern Nevada needs your help. If you would like to volunteer, foster, adopt, or donate, go to the Golden Retriever Rescue of Southern Nevada's website at grrsn.org. That's grrsn.org. Or call 598-GOLD. That's 598-GOLD.
Gee, it's so quiet. Too quiet. Terribly quiet. Awfully quiet.
Do you have an hour to kill? Well, crank up those EVPs, spirit boxes, and walk the haunted halls of the unknown with UK's very own paranormal investigator, David Cook.
You guys ready for this?
The Ghostly Hour, live Sunday, 2 p.m. Pacific, 5 p.m. Eastern.
And now you're mine.
Come hear first-hand accounts of some of the most famous ghost sightings, photos, and videos from around the world. Skeptics, believers, and spirits, both good and bad. Welcome to the Ghostly Hour, hosted by David Cook. Live every Sunday, 2 p.m. Pacific, 5 p.m. Eastern. Exclusively on the KCOR Digital Radio Network. You're listening to UFO Classified with Erica Lukes, where the truth isn't hidden beneath the black lines of a Sharpie.
That's the craziest thing I've ever heard.
To be on with Erica, call 702-425-9230. That's 702-425-9230. Worldwide callers use Skype name KCOR Radio.
Radio contact.
Share your thoughts on the show on Twitter by using hashtag KCOR. Or head over to the live chats at KCORradio.com.
The audience goes nuts.
And now, your host of UFO Classified.
Are you ready?
Erica Lukes.
Welcome back, and I had no doubt this was going to be a show for the memory books. I am here with Dr. Eric Davis, who is the Chief Science Officer of EarthTech International. Dr. Davis, welcome back. You have had so much experience in this field with Bigelow, with NIDS, with now you are an advisor to the Stars Academy, and all of these things. You've had such a vast, just an incredible career, and I will have you back on again and again because we need to know about this. But you were talking about the Collins elite and some of this, the religious, conservative people that are in charge of certain branches of the government, or they can push funding in a certain direction or deny funding. George Knapp did an interview with Senator Harry Reid where he alluded to that fact as well.
Yes.
With regard to that, was there, in Nick Redfern's book, Final Events, were there people involved in the government that were trying to harness this technology and utilize that for reasons that weren't for the best good?
Okay, so the answer is yeah, there has been since the recovery of the Roswell craft. There's always been an interest by the government that they recover something foreign. Could it be the enemy's technology we need to learn? We need to reverse engineer it. And so we have intelligence collection and analysis programs dedicated to recovering our enemy's military weapons and communications and sensor systems, they're what's called mass measurements and signals intelligence and things like that. So we've always had that. So as soon as, a quote unquote alien craft, the alien being we don't know where it's from, but it could be from another star, could be from another dimension, could be from the future, who knows? They crash land or they deliberately land and we recover them. The United States military has a protocol to recover those. It's in the mandate for the national security, for protecting national security, to recover those things and study them and try to figure out what the heck they're made out of and how they work and can we exploit it? Because the odds are high that our enemies also had collected their own crash retrievals and had developed reverse engineering programs, or already had their reverse engineering programs that captured American technology or Western technology per se. And so they would embed any UFO technology into that. Naturally, it would go into the same streams, and so they would try to figure it out and see if they could advance technology, make a new weapon out of it to defend ourselves against our enemies, or a new offensive weapon against our enemies, or what. It's a natural progression of military thinking, and it's part of the national security. It's since World War II. How long ago was that? We're going on 80 years or something. So it's just the philosophy of what we want to do. We want to collect information, analyze it, utilize it to the best of our ability and the best of our talents to be able to protect our nation. And if it means it's a Klingon bird of prey from Kronos that lands on Earth and it's crippled, and it lands in Arizona by any chance, you're darn right that the Air Force and the CIA and everybody's going to retrieve that thing and tear it apart and figure out how it works, because we're going to want to learn how to reproduce that technology, because that'll give us the military edge over our enemies. And right now we're losing our high-tech parity with China and Russia. More so China, because of their heavy theft of intellectual property through their various government rules and regulations on doing business with American companies, and through their cyber espionage. And the same with Russia. The Russians have been more about cyber espionage to divide and conquer our democracy and our civilian population, the American population. And yeah, they're trying to steal stuff too. They always have been. But
and I want to just throw in there on that note with all of this. I mean, I fully believe that there are people involved or inserted in the UFO community, specifically on social media, who are there to disrupt the flow of information and to sway the public sentiment.
Yeah, that's right. That's what's the word? There's a word for those guys. I just can't think of it. It's just
trolls, troll. I mean, they're.
But they're there. Yeah, you've got some individuals out there who are basically just anarchists, and they just want to sow doubt, fear, and chaos, and create division.
And they're also being paid, though. They're paid to steer the narrative.
Yeah, and so set everybody in the UFO community at each other's throats. So that's the diversionary tactic that's used to keep us from studying the UFO problem. We're not working hard here to study the UFO problem as an entire national community of people interested in UFOs. We're too busy killing each other by attacking each other's credibility, reputation. We're attacking every nitpicky little detail of something that some armchair amateur expert thinks they know about FLIR, video monitor displays in F-18 cockpits, whether they should hear the pilot's voice or not, whether they think they're seeing the correct displays or not. Blah, blah, blah. All I hear is a bunch of shit from a bunch of people who don't know what they're talking about. And that is part of the disinformation campaign. And that is part of the, perception management. That's what this is. So it's basically perception management operation to divide and conquer.
And so I have to ask you, I mean, we know back from Roswell on, the United States government deliberately set out to try to discredit or minimalize this topic, marginalize this topic. And so how do all of you who care about studying this topic, researching this topic, how do you combat that? And what role do you think the United States government had in all of this chaos that we're seeing right now?
Well, the government doesn't really play a role in that chaos. They're just they're too busy focused on the news cycle of today, their tasking of today. For the large part, the United States government doesn't care about UFOs. The only part of the government that cares about UFOs, because of its national security implications, is a certain small segment within the Department of Defense and the handful of the intelligence agencies. And so, for the large part, your political appointees out there, I don't have to pick on Donald Trump. It could be any presidential administration. I can throw a dart at any one of them, and the answer will be the same. They legitimately don't care about UFOs because it doesn't have anything to do with the daily flow of their political jobs, their cabinet jobs, their bureaucratic jobs to implement and operate and carry out the government at the orders of both the president and according to the laws that the Congress and the president sign and pass into effect. And so UFOs isn't a big role there. So UFOs is just one of many different things. The CIA and the DOD have climate intelligence, or basically climate intelligence, environmental intelligence. They were worried for many, many years about global warming and the effects on the U.S. military and the effects on foreign countries, because if foreign countries get destabilized as a byproduct of the effects of global warming, then that's going to go into international fallout. There's going to be international relation problems. There's going to be all kinds of fallout coming out of that the United States needs to worry about because of the impact of that fallout of a deteriorating country on the national security. So you can't really, to combat it, there's no method. There's no tried and true or generic or universal method to combat those forces of obstruction in the United States government on this topic.
Okay, and I have to ask you, and I just have to ask you, so we're kind of, and I'm sorry to cut you off, but we're running short of time, and I want to just ask you some really important questions here because I've got questions in chat. But so as far as Roswell, so was Roswell a real AAV event? Were there programs prior to what we've been told to look at technology with regards to Roswell, and then from then on? Can you clarify that?
Yeah. John Alexander has always said that in the early years, he said Roswell was an enigma because he could disprove the mogul balloon explanation. He talked to various people at Los Alamos when he was there running as a civilian, running the non-lethal weapons program that he founded there. And so he thought that the government's explanation for Roswell was absolutely bunk, and he was right. I mean, he still will say that. But now he's changed his mind in more recent years, in between the publication of his books, and now he's back to the balloon explanation on Roswell, and I'm not sure why it changed his mind. He doesn't know the right people to talk to. He didn't have the need to know, and he didn't have the right clearances to access those people with the need to know to ask those questions. And I'm not going to get into the MJ-12 documents or the ones that have been released. I'm going to get into what I know that is of sensitive information still. But yeah, Roswell was a real event. It happened. And it was a stupid, phony cover-up that General Ramey was ordered by Washington to institute in order to shut the story down as quick as possible because of what they had recovered was pretty spectacular. And they just didn't want it getting out to the Soviets and anybody else that they had recovered that craft and the bodies. So yeah, we got a crash retrieval, and Roswell is there. And I disagree with John Alexander when he says that he couldn't find any evidence of it. But Phil Corso made it clear that there was evidence, and there was. I've done background investigation on Phil Corso that went beyond what John was capable of doing. And I verified Corso's story and verified every word he said about Roswell. So it happened. And
I've got to just clarify, because people, hear Corso and their hackles come up. I think that probably his book was embellished by Bill Burns, but correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah. And if you read the handwritten manuscript that Phil wrote of his autobiography, you'll find the very small section in the book where he talks about the Roswell crash, how when he was a retired civilian, his good buddy, Lieutenant General Arthur Trudeau, had hired him at the Army Research Agency, or, this has been a long time since I've read that story, so I might get a little bit of the details wrong. But his job as a civilian was to handle the crash retrieval materials and assign them out to the various defense contractors for analysis and reverse engineering studies. and so that proved out to be true, and so it's there. And there were several other crash retrievals that had happened after that. Yeah, it's there. And so the problem is, for the most part, the people, you've got a mix of people. You've got those Collins elite. And like I said, they are not a loose confederacy of people. They are not an organized group of people by any means. It is just individuals here and there that were born and raised in Kansas or Oklahoma or parts of Texas or elsewhere in the South or the Midwest. And they were raised in fundamental evangelical churches, Protestant churches. Some are even very fundamentalist Catholics, and there are some of them that are even Mormons, and they have very extreme views about UFOs and the aliens or the UFOnauts that occupy them, and they think they're satanic and and the UFOs are demonic technology, and so they are the roadblocks. They provide obstruction whenever they're in the chain of command. Whenever they come across something like this, they're very sensitive to it, and they'll do whatever they can to expose such a program, shut it down, block it, run interference, do anything they can to either stop it, keep it from being implemented, or keep it from getting funded, or keep it from getting new funding. And it's really pathetic, and it's really bad that it's based on fear, incompetence, greed, and careerism. And I think greed is really the word. I think there's another word I'm missing, and greed is not the right word, but fear, incompetence, and careerism is the three of the words I can remember, but out of the four.
And absolutely, I couldn't agree with you.
That is what goes on inside the military intelligence community where the topic of UFOs comes up. And that's why the crash retrieval program was buried as black and deep as it could be buried to keep it protected from those morons.
And so I've got to ask you, I've got so many questions. You are coming back, but do you know, I'm being asked the unclassified title of the 4,900-page UFO history that Luis Elizondo mentioned?
Are you talking about the 38 DIRD reports?
I believe that's what they are referring to.
Okay, I cannot talk about what the titles are of the two classified ones. They're classified.
Okay.
The ones that have been released just recently, today or yesterday, one of them got redacted, the other one didn't, and that was a mistake. But there are 36 that are for official use only. That's the lowest level of classification, so technically they can't be unclassified. That's kind of a contradiction. I don't know how that happened, but that happens. You have some mistakes made in the government here and there on these red tape things. So the 36 that are named are for official use only, which is the lowest level of classification. But they're also stamped unclassified. So there they are. Two of those reports, not two of the 36, but two of the 38 are classified, and I'm not going to acknowledge their titles because I can't.
And so I have to
contracted those. So
yeah, well, and I have to ask you because Keith Basterfield in his blog mentioned some of the fact that two of these DIRDs were given to Corey Good. Like, how did Corey Good get that information?
I have no idea. I don't even know who Corey Good is.
And so, could that have been leaked? Was that leaked by somebody?
Well, all I know is that George Knapp mentioned in his I-team report a few months ago, or maybe even 2 months ago, a month ago, he said that he had it. Now, I didn't read the article yet, and all I remember from a byline on that, or the subtitle heading, and some commentary he put on his Facebook post, is that he went to the Beltway and he met with a government official, and I don't recall him naming it, but I think that might have been Harry Reid. So he met with the government official, whether it's Harry Reid or not, and he got access to those titles, to those report titles. And he did get, I think he was given possibly a copy of one. And I know that the other two that are out there were leaked. So, and then from what I heard from you before was that Corey Good got a number of them, and all of a sudden they were stolen off his computer, but I don't know anything about that. So I don't know who that individual is, and I don't know why anybody would go to his computer to steal those reports off of them. it doesn't make sense, and it's not in the FBI's purview to want to do that because those reports aren't. Only 2 of them are sensitive, but the others are not. But they're not going to be officially released in the public domain because they're still being used. Those documents are actively being used, and I don't know if the DoD will eventually decide they could be exempt from FOIA. They're in the FOIA circular file right now, and they're going to remain there using one of the nice little tools of FOIA exemptions. So the reason is because they're still in use, and those are documents that go to the future of our national security technologies, and, it's not a good idea to reveal that. I'm not interested in letting the goddamn Russians know about what we're looking at 50 years into the future, or the Chinese, and both of them are vacuum cleaners of intelligence, just like we are. We steal from them, and they steal from us. So, so that's why I don't know that they are going to be destined to be released. The 2 classified ones will never be released, and because they contain sensitive military information, and based on this technical topic that they pertain to. So, I'm really reluctant. I'm okay that 3 of them got leaked. They're not, they're based on stuff I published in the past. My boss has published in the past. And, okay. And then we allowed the authors of the unclassified ones to publish technical papers in the peer-reviewed journals out in the open domain on the topics of those reports. So they're perfectly free to do so. Hal's already had one. I've got a number of them on my reports, and actually almost all of my reports, all but one of my reports is based on is like a very updated, advanced, highly evolved version of reports I generated for the Air Force Research Lab back in the early 2000s. So it's all new material. It's got all new material in it, but it's based on contract work I did for the Air Force back in the early 2000s, after I left NIDS. And so that's where it is. That's what I know about that.
Okay, and I've got to ask you really quickly, Richard Doty has inserted himself into the narrative again. What is your take on Doty?
Doty's such a complex individual. I've met him. He's a really great guy. We sat at a conference table in my boss's office and shot the breeze. And he's actually a upstanding, straight and narrow guy. I mean, he's a highly decorated New Mexico State police officer. I think he might be retired by now. And he was with AFOSI as a special agent, as everybody in the UFO community knows. And he pulled a lot of hijinks on Linda Howe and other folks, and he's upset them, and, he tells a different story every time. I don't want to offer an opinion because I only met him one time, and I've had no real interactions with him after that or before that. The people in the know would be the best, and, they don't want to talk about it because the conversations they've had in looking into Doty's background were all done in official government formats, and so they cannot reveal any of that.
Okay.
I know there's been a lot of publications that talk about that, but I'm not gonna address it because I'm not a Doty expert.
Okay, thank you. And then that's good because there's so much.
I don't have anything. You're welcome.
There's so much. And I just want to say that there's so much, out there right now, and we see so many different people that were involved, that were giving misinformation or disinformation. It's like, I think that there are good researchers or people that care about this. I think of my friends Barry Greenwood and Jan Aldrich and different people that have researched this, and they just want good information. And it is so hard, as you know, because you have to keep things classified. There are things that the public will never know, and that's probably a good thing, especially when you look at other countries trying to steal intelligence and all of this. But where would you say that people like us who care about this subject, who care about the history, what can we do to assist you or to assist ourselves and carry the important work forward?
Well, that's a good question. I would need to take some time to think about an answer for that. That's not a quick and easy answer. How about you remember to ask me that question next time, and I will have an answer for you.
Okay. I love it. And thank you. And I one more question really quick before we go. I've got a question from chat. Are you under NDA with regard to government classification and you can't answer these questions? Which, of course, you are. Yeah.
Well, yeah, I can't acknowledge or confirm whether or not I have security clearances. But I can say, when you're working with the Pentagon, you're under the NDA as associated with certain type of tickets that you need to have to get access to information. So, I'm restricted from revealing anything, really.
Okay, thank you. And so where can we, what will To the Stars Academy, what are the new things that will be happening, especially since we've just heard about the new program?
Yeah, basically Hal and I are going to be, we're actually in the process already, taking materials that were recovered from UFO close encounters by civilian witnesses. And there was a chain of custody on some of these materials, and I think there was a little bit of a provenance problem on one of them that's getting cleared up as we speak, or it's in the process of getting cleared up eventually. And so we had a nice, clear, solid chain of custody of transferring the materials from the witnesses and eventually to us. And we're going to take them in for testing of their isotope ratios and materials analysis. We're going to look and see what elements they're made out of, and ascertain if there's any functionality to them, if possible, and then what isotopic ratios they might have. An isotope meaning the elements in the periodic table of atomic elements basically are defined by their atomic mass, and atomic mass is defined by a fixed number of protons and neutrons for every element in the atomic table. So some of these elements will actually have more neutrons than others.
And so I will have you back, and it will be in the next little bit because there's so much more to learn. Dr. Eric Davis, thank you for being here and answering these questions and giving us insight into Skinwalker and so much more. I'm Erica Lukes. I will be here next week, so stick around. Now on KCOR, great night of broadcasting. Lily Miranda is up. We will catch you next week.
Listen very carefully.
This is Houston. Say again, please. Houston, we've had a problem.
This is UFO Classified, live every Friday night, 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern, exclusively on the KCOR Digital Radio Network. The truth is out there, just waiting to be discovered.
And now, if you will, accompany me on a journey to the future.
For more information on the host of UFO Classified, Erica Lukes, upcoming guests, as well as links to the past shows, visit her website at UFOclassified.com. UFO Classified. UFO Classified. UFO Classified. This is KCOR Las Vegas, home of the Digital Radio Network, broadcasting from a shack just south of